Hey, what's going on everybody, and welcome back to the Whiskey Cove. And on today's episode, we review Bulleit 12-Year Rye. Let's see what this thing's all about. Run the video. Right then folks, welcome back to another new episode of the Whiskey Cove, where we will be deep diving into Bulleit 12-Year Rye. So this is a new release from the Bulleit distillery in Kentucky. This is 100% sourced juice from MGP whiskey. This is their 95-5 mash bill, so 95% rye and 5% malted barley, so no corn in the mash bill, and at face value maybe a rye drinker's rye. ABV on this is not the highest. It is 46% ABV on 92 proof. So much like what a lot of Bulleit does, it sounds like it might appeal to the masses. So I'm thinking of something that will appeal to rye drinkers. It will appeal to the masses of people who enjoy not paying that much for whiskey but getting good value for money. Before we get into today's video, if you're not a subscriber, definitely hit that subscribe button. We're always doing reviews, blind battles, whiskeys to look out for, where we look into the forthcoming month and see what whiskey's coming out to keep you folks at home up to date with the most readily available information at your fingertips. Hit that bell icon so you never miss one of those videos. If you'd like to support the channel, go over to the Whiskey Cove's Patreon, Patreon/Whiskey Cove, and also go over and check out the Whiskey Cove website, thewhiskeycove.square.site. The link for both of those is down in the description below. Over on the website, you'll find some excellent glassware like this Glencairn at rock bottom prices. With that being said, let's get into today's whiskey. So this was available a few years ago, the 12-Year Rye, and then they brought it back by a popular demand, I believe it was. The label looked a little bit different. From what I remember, it was like a beigey and black sort of label, and they've kind of upgraded it and really fallen in line with a lot of what other distilleries are doing. When they make rye whiskey, it almost synonymously needs to have a green label. And this has a green label, as you can see. So with Bulleit bottles in general, I've always really liked these throwback style bottles. I think these are the most sexy bottles that there is in whiskey. There's just something that's really eye-catching and kind of just old school about them. It has that kind of old school medicinal prohibition bourbon style. For the bottle, for the brand, and they absolutely knocked it out of the park. Not just this Bulleit, but just Bulleits in general. Like I said, this is a distillery down in Kentucky, however, Louisville, Kentucky. However, it is MGP juice from Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Lawrenceburg, Indiana, yes, correct, from the home of MGP. So let's get this whiskey into the glass here. So how much did I pay for this bottle of whiskey? So I only paid $50 for it, and then $50 for a 12-year rye is pretty darn good value for money, as long as the whiskey adds up to it in the glass. Just looking at the whiskey and how it sits a little thin, if I'm completely honest, which kind of falls in line with rye in general, and also this ABV, which is 46%. I would say straw, golden style color there in the glass. Let's go in for a nose here. If you're someone who has had a lot of MGP rye specifically, and specifically this mash bill, the 95-5, there's definitely some hallmarks to it. A really nice mintness there, spearmint, the vanilla, the spearmint, the rolled rye grain, eucalyptus as well, like maybe some aloe vera out of like a suntan bottle. But it does a really good job for something that doesn't have a lot of corn in it. It has a really nice sweetness there as well that helps balance out some of those eucalyptus minty notes. I don't get any dill, which is another popular note for this mash bill. Maybe a little bit of toffee there. Small little bit of wood, but the fresh rye grain definitely dominates. I've said this a lot when I'm trying ryes. If you ever have like a Reuben, and it comes on rye bread, definitely try to pick out a rye seed, especially as a whiskey drinker, this is something important you should do. Try to pick out a rye seed and just kind of roll it on the table, roll it in your hand, and kind of see what kind of notes you get, like the savory, the mint, the eucalyptus. You'll get all of that, and that's just in this glass in abundance. But what it does a good job is, those are quite polarizing notes, but it does bring it all together with the sweetness and some of those vanilla notes, and it balances out quite well. For a rye, this is everything I want in a rye. The ABV doesn't blow my socks off, of course it doesn't, but something that's really approachable, has a lot of rye flavors, but it's quite balanced in the same aspects out there. Let's go in for a taste here. This is Bulleit 12 Year Rye. I would say it's a lot more woodier on the palate. More like a darker, browner wood, something like a pecan wood, or maybe even like a hickory. It kind of has a lot of that drying of the palate. Again, mixed in with some of that rye grain, like freshly rolled rye grain. A little bit of a savory note there as well. Maybe a touch of cumin actually on the back end if we're really trying to pick apart those spices. I get that note from a lot of Sagamore products, which is primarily sourced from MGP. Sagamore still do make their own distillate now, more so as they're catching up to speed a little bit, but some of their older stuff, like the single barrel picks, share a lot of similarities with this, and they don't have half the age, or they do have probably just about half the age. A lot of those are 6 years and this is a 12 year. So you get a lot more of that wood presence, backing that up with those rye notes. And those spices, not bacon spices, but literally almost like Indian cuisine spices. And then what it does really well, it adds a little bit of that sweetness there as well, drawing from like a maple syrup, or drawing from a treacle type of sweetness, those darker, more charred sweetnesses. Let's go in for another taste here. Mouthfeel, it's actually quite rich, quite oily. Even after a while, I'm still trying to pick apart some of those notes that have done a really great job of coating the mouth. What I will say about this whiskey is, if you're someone who really enjoys bourbons and you're kind of maybe thinking about getting into the world of rye, this might not be the rye for you. It is quite it does have quite a lot of rye notes. It's very, very much a rye drinker's rye, and it lets you know that is for sure. You don't have the ABV that kind of makes it even more spicy, so it is quite palatable with those sweeter notes there. Finish is, I would say, quite a long finish, medium to long. Like I said, the age kind of helps with that, but that real nice, rich maple syrup, treacle sweetness kind of also lends to that as well, because it does push out a little bit with the rye notes and then with the oaky notes there as well. So if you are new to this channel, we review whiskey and we give them 2 grades. So the first grade is what we like to do is value for money. Value for money is A, being the best value for money, F being the worst, but it's not just value for money, I feel like, at this point. We also take into account findability, the whiskey, what it looks like, a little bit of everything, if you like. We try to take that into consideration. And then the second scale is 0 to 100, 100 being the best, 0 being the worst. And we just take into account the whiskey that is in the bottle, how that tastes, and then we rank it accordingly there. So we will do value for money. So like I said, $50, a 12-year age stated rye. Yes, from MGP, but you see a lot of stuff that gets sourced from MGP and marked up double and sometimes triple than that. This is a good rye. This is a solid rye. Lots of rye flavor that you would come to expect from an MGP rye. Some of those quintessential notes, if you like. Value for money. It's really hard to see anything past an A at this point. $50 for a 12-year whiskey in general is right on point. When you get the rye notes and how good the whiskey is on its own, definitely lends to that as well. So value for money, that's a solid A for me. So then, score out of 100. And I'm kind of giving it away almost in some parts. You know, this, like I said, good rye. I could see this being a really good go-to rye for me as just a neat pour. With the ABV, some of the ABV might get lost in a cocktail. However, I feel like the rye notes will kind of bring it through. This might be really good in a Manhattan. Heck, even in an old-fashioned, it could be awesome there as well. So score out of 100. I think in terms of if I'm looking for a rye, an everyday rye that is versatile. I can use it in a bunch of stuff. With that age statement as well, I'm gonna give this 81 out of 100, and that is an excellent score. Potentially it's an 8 out of 10, but I feel like it's a hell of a score for a bottle that you can find on shelves. Yes, this is a brand new release, so please be patient as it starts to hit shelves nationwide. But as I've been hunting for different whiskeys, I've been able to see this in a few different places there as well. So yes, it is backed by popular demand, and long may that continue. So thank you for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed this review. If you are new around here, definitely hit that subscribe button too, as we drink through the world's whiskies one glass at a time. Bulleit 12-year rye absolutely coming in clutch. Cheers.